Welcome back to Story Hustler. I'm Dylan.
And I'm Mike.
And we're coming to the end of the legal battles within the Sam saga. LaDell Bistline will be sentenced tomorrow. Torrance will be sentenced later this week. And Moroni will be sentenced early in next year. And he's a name that doesn't get mentioned enough. So we have two very special guests on. Faith, you've been on this show before, kind of been our guiding light throughout this whole thing. And Victoria, thank you so much for joining us today. We really do want to get your insights into the unfinished business, if you will, with these last three men waiting to be sentenced.
There's so much more to the story, and you guys know the history better than really anyone, and as well as anyone. Victoria, if you're new to the show, we appreciate you joining us. Tell us your reaction to how this legal drama is playing out, Sam's sentencing, and give our audience some sense of how you're linked to this story.
Uh, I was 14 years old, and one of the girls shipped to the Canada sect of our group, and Moroni, he was in charge of the group that night. Moroni Johnson, Samuel Bateman, Jerry Bateman, and Don Carlos Johnson, and then I and my older sister Jamie Cooke. We were in a Suburban and we crashed at 4 o'clock in the morning. We rolled and I ended up paralyzed, and Samuel Bateman had a head injury. Moroni had injuries. And that night was the night I actually met both of them, Moroni and Sam.
The night of this accident.
Yes.
Wow.
And it left me paralyzed from the car accident.
Just 25 years ago now, right?
Yes.
And you have been in a wheelchair ever since. And this is because of your initial contact with the names we now know, Moroni Johnson and Samuel Bateman. What were these men doing with the young women, you and your sister? Where were you going when this accident happened, and why were you going?
It's a hard word for me to say, but we were being sex trafficked.
Even back then. Even back then, these men were involved.
Yes. We didn't know it. They didn't tell us that. That wasn't what we understood it as. As it never is. They're never honest with you, and that's how things are going. But we were under the impression that because Jamie and I were born in Colorado City, and so we were a little bit rebellious, and so the idea that was presented to us was that we were going to Canada to get away from our peers to help us be good girls. And these four men that we rode with that night, I've thought a lot about how things played out, and it may not be accurate because this is my interpretation of how things, because I ended up paralyzed for the rest of my life, and so I've thought it over and over and over, how it played out, why we ended up in that car, in their role in it. And at that time, then almost all the young girls that got sent up there had been involved with the law one way or another. Not all of them, but a huge majority of the underage marriages were. And I feel like that what the deal was is that they had a bunch of men come of age that they needed wives, and most of the fathers that had good girls didn't want to send them to Canada. That's a long ways away. And so why not send the ones that were already trouble? The time that I rode with those men, then I became aware that there was several of the kids, girls, and because there was a few boys that got shipped up there too, that would hop out in Salt Lake. And I think that the reason why it ended up the way that it did wasn't especially that it was the first ride, because it was so out of ordinary with how things went. Usually there was a female, there had to be a mother, right? There was 2 young girls with 4 men. That was not how things worked in our culture at all. There was always a mother, somebody's wife, or an adult female, and there wasn't. And so I've wondered if it was kind of a little bit of an intimidation to make us shut up, hold still, be good, and get our ass up there.
Wow.
You said you met Moroni and Sam that night. You didn't know them prior to that. What was your impression of them?
They were coming from Las Vegas, and they were going to pick us up at the Tokerville exit. And they said that they would be in Tokerville in like a half hour or something insane. And my mother, when we, they told us when to be there, but we took a little bit longer time because that was not a normal time frame. And so when we got there, then Moroni sat there and let us know that they'd been waiting on us for a while. And my mother, she told Moroni that, because my mother, she got, if there's anybody that got a connection with God, that lady does. Okay. She's inspired in a way that I'd never seen, but she told Moroni that she was uncomfortable with how fast he was traveling. And he goes, "Oh, mother," and the way they say it like that, it's a condescending sort of. And he goes, "Oh, mother, God travels faster than that." Yeah, because she was telling him she was uncomfortable with how his speeding, because he was clearly speeding. And she didn't sleep. She told us later that she didn't sleep that entire night, and that when she got that, my father and her got the call, then it wasn't really that much of a surprise. I mean, it's always a surprise, but she kind of was expecting something.
And she gets the call that basically this car with the 4 men and you and your sister has now turned over about 6 times. And
60 times we rolled up a hill and then back down. The
and
Suburban landed on top of Moroni, actually.
and you're left paralyzed. Sam gets a significant brain injury. This is a traumatic event that changes your life. Now these very same men are thrust into this drama now, and Faith, I want to bring you into. But Victoria, give us. You know these guys. I sense that you don't feel very good about what happened and who these guys are, and then you hear what's gone on now. Your reaction, your feelings.
Sam, so when they do horror movies, then they make a woman scream, and it's supposed to scare you, but I'll tell you that you really want to be afraid you hear a grown man wail and gurgle and scream, because Sam had hit his head and he ended up in a coma. And when he came out of the coma, he was mean. He was different. He went in kind of like a little bit of a rock star that had just turned his life over, because he had been a little bit of a wild one. He had some stories, and he shared some of that with me and sis on the way up, and then it was like 2 different people. He got in the car that night as a decent person, came out an asshole. And
Is that an
so
is that an excuse for what he has done? I mean, did he change? Did it mentally change him?
Was there a truth to the
Just
competency
yeah, they're
issue
trying to
that
say
they
his
raised?
lawyers were trying to say he was crazy.
So I have an opinion, and it's probably not a popular one, but I actually think that Moroni was, I think that what happened is that okay, when the FBI raided Texas, we got to watch, and all of us that weren't involved, and we got to witness that if you had evidence, then you weren't held accountable either. So if you even if it was last minute, you turned over evidence, then you got to walk scot-free, no matter how much you were involved up to it. And I think Moroni is an extremely manipulative person. And I think that Moroni played a game where he made a fighting dog out of Sam and the dog turned on him. That's what I think.
Faith, jump in. Your reaction. We haven't spoken to you since your brothers were found guilty. They're going to be sentenced. Sam has gotten 50 years. And this man, Moroni, who we all think probably hasn't gotten enough attention, sentenced early next year. Jump in. Your feelings on any of this.
Yeah, so I felt like there was like almost this hush hush surrounding Moroni ever since the FBI first got involved with this group because Moroni decided to work with them. And so that's why I haven't said as much as I probably should about him. And then this week I decided, like, why haven't I shouted him out more? And there was a conversation that I had with Victoria back in 2022 where she was like, yo, Moroni is actually the one who's probably the ringleader and sort of using Sam to like manipulate him so that Moroni isn't the one that's being held accountable.
Really?
Well, at the beginning, I think that was the case, but I think what happened was that Sam actually got a high head and enough money and enough backing. Then he turned on Moroni because he didn't want to be told what to do anymore.
And give us a sense for these two guys. It sounds like, Warren was in charge and most people were following the rules and not having sex and not having family. And it sounds like Moroni and Sam sort of at the same time went rogue and said, we're not going to do that anymore. God's talking to us. And,
Well, Moroni went first and kind
Moroni
of started
went first,
creating
yeah.
these ideas of like talking to God, not the prophet talking to God.
Fill in some of the chronology as you noted. How did we get to this point with these two guys basically leading the charge?
Do you want me to go or Victoria?
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
Both
Okay. So when Moroni first started his thing, that I honestly believe he probably started it, and Sam kind of like got in there after the fact. He was having a lot of the girls record their testimonies of why they believe, Sam was the prophet. And one of Moroni's daughters, and I listened to this testimony, she talked about how her dad is the one who told her that Sam was the prophet. And she remembers looking at Sam and thinking, I wonder if he has any idea who he is. And it was Moroni who fed her this. And that's why I believe that he is one of the biggest players in this.
Well, and he's.
Do you remember that video that I shared on that page about the first follower?
Yeah.
Amelia. I very much think that Moroni, he set it up to, even in any bit that we did here publicly, he was the one that was pushing the narrative that Sam was the prophet. And I think it was, if everybody's looking over here, nobody's looking over here.
Yeah.
And
kind of the vibe
he pushed it and pushed it and pushed it. He convinced all of them that Sam was the prophet.
Yeah, without Moroni, Sam would not have happened, it sounds like.
Yeah.
It's interesting now going into the sentencing for Moroni, based off of what the judge has given all of the adult women involved, and now Sam. I mean, it sounds like she's going to throw the book at Liddell and Torrance too. One, because of what they did. Two, because they made them go through a trial and go through all of that heartache all over again. But we're kind of interested in the Moroni sentencing. I feel like that's kind of up in the air. What are you guys hoping for? What are you two hoping for that he gets? And based off of what you've seen with the other sentences, what do you think he'll get if it differs?
Anybody? Either of you?
So, I went out and didn't have anything to do with any of them for many, many years. And I mean, what happened with me sucked. It was shitty, but it sucked. But I recognized that there was a lot of people that made mistakes from home. And with all sincerity, my hope and my full heart was that people were Moroni, Sam, Jerry, all of them were going out and living their best life. And had have they gone and done that, I would have never brought up the past. I would have just let it go. But when I heard what was going on, the first time I heard about it, I I was so pissed off. I called the FBI. But they probably got 100 calls because I'm sure I wasn't the first one to hear about it. But it'd been all these years of not hearing a word, and then all of a sudden out of nowhere I'm hearing and then reading that uh, affidavit that they turned over, that Moroni and Julia turned over, 43 pages of shit that would tear your heartstrings out about how Moroni marries his 9-year-old daughter to Sam, and he assaults her and she wets the bed, and he gets mad at her, and then her mother goes and gathers her up and cleans her up, and this is just okay, just all right, and then I believe that they've performed fellatio on each other in front of those young innocent girls, and it was always about the girls to me. It was always about the girls.
Yeah.
And how do we stop them to keep them? Because here's the thing is like when I started hollering, Moroni hadn't what Moroni had been telling people was that he had made a deal with the FBI to turn evidence towards Samuel, and so he wouldn't be federally charged at the time that I was hearing about like what was going to happen with them. And so to me, I just all I wanted was for people to be aware of who he was. If you just blindly think, oh, he was taken advantage of, he's not that way, then that means that you're not protecting the innocent, and that is our job, is to protect the innocent, at least to the best that we can. Whether we do a good job or not, we gotta try.
Gotta try.
That's-
Faith, jump in, go.
Well, that's an interesting point that I want to ask to both of you, because, if you're saying one adult follower was manipulated into doing these acts, then how do you feel about the women who have been sentenced now? Like Jomi's gotten 15 years for her role in this. Do you have a sense of sympathy? Because obviously they were raised in this community, the role of women in this patriarchal society. Like, do you feel sympathy, but also anger? Is it a mixed emotion? What is your angle about that?
Do you want me to go ahead?
Yeah, both of you.
Okay.
Because I think we both have feelings about that. But yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like most of the women in this situation started out as victims, and then eventually some of them became perpetrators. And so they are both. They're both a victim and a perpetrator coexisting in the same person. And that's where it gets complicated. And I think we have to look at the safety of the children that will be around them if they're out in the public. Can they be rehabilitated? Can they not? That's kind of what you have to go off of. It really sucks that they're victimized and now they have to, do prison time. But the safety of society, of children, of, everyone is the priority. And so that's how I feel.
Are these guys still a danger? Is Moroni still a danger? Because he's not. He's going to be sentenced in February. But he's still out, and there are people who definitely are sort of speaking up for him. And is Moroni a bad guy, and should he do a lot of time in prison?
He should spend the rest of his life in prison. He should never, ever, I think I don't know why he's not in prison right now. I think he's a danger to people he's around right now. Like, when I talked, Victoria, when I was on that phone call with you, you mentioned that you were supposed to be married to Moroni at 14, correct? And this was before Sam was even in the picture. So this is who Moroni is as a person. This is not Sam manipulating him. This is who Moroni is. And then during your recovery, you were mentioning some things like in the hospital and like where he didn't believe you. He didn't believe that you were actually paralyzed. He thought you were faking it. And how he was treating you was just mind blowing to me. Like he is a very, very bad man.
And
Yes.
it's so fascinating, just Victoria. I've read your account, and it's just heart rending. It's beautifully presented. You're laying there badly injured, and Sam's brother is on the phone to 911, but then cuts off from 911 because and doesn't give him to call Warren Jeffs instead of while you're lying there virtually near dead. Sam is unconscious. Everybody's injured in this horrible accident. And again, they were trafficking young girls
Back then.
25 years ago. These again, I think it's important for people to understand these stories just don't come out of nowhere, and these guys don't come out of nowhere. They have histories, and this is why it's so important, I think, for you to fill in some of these details.
Yeah, but Victoria, I want your opinion on, the women that are
Right.
involved in this too. What do you think?
So, I've spent a lot of time thinking about that because I could have been one. I almost was. I mean, shit, it's days away from being one of his wives. I mean, I could have been because I would have been number two. Julia was the first, and when I was assigned to marry him, I was 14, and the only reason is because of my mother, and she wasn't even any. But so I've thought a lot about it, but the unforgivable part to me is reading all that. Okay, that happens. Moroni manipulated all those ladies, and us as human beings, we get to boundaries that you just push a little bit more and push a little bit more. You can kind of justify almost every act, but somehow they felt like that Moroni committing the blood atonement was too far, but not marrying their 9-year-old daughter. And so that they have a moral boundary. It's just towards the wrong damn person. And so to me, the fact that some of the wives and that they would get out and go talk to the FBI when their husband may actually die, but not when their child is hurting. I feel like that, yes, exactly what she said, that they were victims, but then they turned into perpetrators. And the thing is I'm not innocent of offenses or life things or whatever, but I damn sure have never, like, there are souls know when it's too far.
What should happen to Moroni? Yeah, Faith says he should go away for life. You know Moroni and in long history. What are your feelings, Victoria?
I feel like he is an extremely dangerous man, just like what Faith said. I feel like that he is so smooth, and he got people vouching for him, and I would have never ever talked about what happened with me if he would have just gone and been a good person, because he made me feel like that there was guilt in there and that was mine to carry as a 14-year-old child, a little girl. And I know I wasn't his first. No fucking way was, excuse me, I was not his first. And he, like I said, when he convinces people he's not dangerous, that's when he's the most dangerous.
You know, and he could get a very sweet deal. I mean,
Mhm.
because if for folks who have followed the story, you know that Sam and he had three men who basically propped him up. Liddell Bistline, Torrance Bistline, and Moroni Johnson, and the four men. And Sam's gotten all the headlines, and everybody knows them. But to the extent that these other men were involved, there, I think the brothers, your brothers, are going to get sentenced this week, Faith, and it's our bet that the judge throws the book at him after the trials, you know, and given the sentencing. But Moroni's the wild card. He's going to get sentenced next year, and he did. He went on the witness stand and he testified in convicting Torrance and Liddell, and he's clearly made a deal with, you know, the feds say we didn't make a deal. He's expecting a deal. He's hoping he did, you know, maybe he wants to clean his soul and maybe he's a self-righteous man now, but he's also hoping for a deal.
Well, here's the thing about men like that. He'll do it again because he's already proven he's gotten away with it multiple times, and he'll keep doing it because he thinks he's above the law. He's thought he's been above the law. That's why he drove the way he drove, and he keeps getting away with it. And every time he gets away with it, he gets a little more confident because God's on his team. He's doing the Lord's work, whatever he convinces himself, and he will do it again if he is not convicted for till he's old. He will.
Till he dies. That's what I hope. I hope he's there till he dies.
Having grown up in this community, I feel like there's been talk between trying to separate like Sam versus the mainstream FLDS, and how like the mainstream doesn't teach like this child abuse, child marriage. But you have had two, you know, Warren and Rulon, who both took underage brides. And, you know, it's kind of hard for like the outside world to say, well, if your prophet is taking these underage brides, it's kind of hard to see how that's not like giving the okay to the community. And then you have like Sam, who's a one-off. Like, do you differentiate the two, or does it kind of seem like this community sort of breeds that abuse? Not everybody in the community does obviously do that, but it happens in this community a decent amount.
Okay, I haven't. I just in the last couple months, I have had an experience where one of my brothers got arrested. He hasn't gone through all this stuff or anything, but it was for a sex crime. And what I've experienced since this is where people want to hold everybody accountable for other people's actions. And my brother's a grown man. Somehow I'm supposed to be accountable for his choices, even though I wasn't in the vicinity. I've been trying to get better from that bite. I got bit by a brown recluse a year ago, and I've been in the hospital almost nonstop since. So, and it's easy to just throw it at the whole town that they make them, and that everybody, all the men from Colorado City are just these dirtbags and stuff like that. I can't agree with that. I feel like some of the most incredible men have come from Colorado City. Some of the most beautiful, kind, sympathetic, sincere, authentic men have come from Colorado City. And some of the worst human beings have come from Colorado City.
Faith, what's your opinion on that, you know, it's different, the mainstream FLDS versus the Samuelites?
We did, yeah, it was interesting to hear some of, you know, the mainstream people who got on the witness stand.
Yeah.
And it was like, you know, Sam, we hate Sam. Sam's a bad guy, and definitely we did bad things. And then the attorneys would remind them that Warren Jeffs is in prison for raping.
But they would say he's in prison.
Oh, but that's wrong, and he's a good guy. I mean, there really is this sort of, compartmentalizing on the part of a lot of people, and we all do it. But
And we're not judging. We're
there are
simply
good
asking.
people in all communities, but it was fascinating to see that some people made the distinction. Sam's a horrible guy for taking and doing this to underage girls, but Warren's a good guy, and we just don't believe that. I'm sure you see that among your family members and the people who are still in.
Yeah. So I think culturally in the FLDS, when a really young girl gets married, she's like elevated. This happens to the elite members. The elite members get, child brides. And if you're a child bride, you are so much more righteous, so much more pure than everybody else, right? So it's common, I think, because of that. And I think a lot of the young girls, they're groomed into wanting to get married when they're little. And then the adult people in the group will say, well, they wanted it. Well, you can't consent to this when you're a child. And they don't understand that. They don't understand consent. They don't understand.
You've written beautifully about that in your own experience. I was just reading some of your writings about your youth, and you talk about that so beautifully, Faith, in your own story. But yeah, your brothers, what do you hope happens?
I think Ludd should be locked up forever, to be honest. I don't think Ludd is ever going to change. And I think it's wrong that he drug our little sisters up on the witness stand to relive their trauma in front of everyone. I think that's incredibly wrong, and all the other girls. And then was asking his lawyer to like crack jokes. Like when he asked them, like, can you tell me what the keep sweet pill is?
Right.
And yeah. And then it was like almost like a joke to Ludd. So it's like he's not taking it seriously. He's not taking it seriously. And I don't think he's going to change. So I think Ludd, Moroni, and Sam should never get out ever. Torrance, I mean, obviously he needs to spend prison time. Hopefully he can get rehabilitated. I don't think he deserves the same sentence that they do, but maybe, I don't know, 15 years or something like Jomi, maybe a little more. I don't know.
Yeah, it was interesting because really one of the most shocking moments in the trial was several people testified that Liddell was known to go around town saying basically, girls should be, this was his philosophy, girls should be educated at 8.
Baptized.
I'm baptized at 8 and married at 9. And that was apparently he had said that,
That was his motto.
That was it. Had you heard that before, Faith? Or you?
I hadn't, but it doesn't surprise me.
This whole drama has dredged up, it brought it all back for you, Victoria. It has exposed your family and your kind heart, Faith, trying to pick up the pieces. I'm curious to know what both of you sort of take away from this.
I think it's that the FBI should be ashamed of themselves for letting Moroni testify against everybody that he set up.
Really? Okay.
I think it should be illegal. He's the one. It's like somebody going and getting somebody hooked on drugs and then turning them in.
Well, and that happens all the time in criminal prosecution. Some real guilty guy says, I'm going to go cut a deal first, and it'll make it better for me, and I'm going to let everybody else take the fall. Not the first.
Well, that's what he's doing. He testified in the Sam's case and then these other ones just so that his deal isn't so bad. When it never would have turned into what it turned into without him. He's the one that should be held the most accountable, in my opinion, because Sam had a brain injury. He was doing what Moroni convinced him he was special. That guy didn't wake up and go, "Hey, I'm the prophet." And even if he did, how many men get up and say, "I'm Jesus" or "I'm the prophet" and wander around and everybody go, "Oh, he's loony." Well, somebody had to convince other people that Sam was for there to be as a following.
Sam was with you the night of the accident, but I mean, back then, if they're trafficking, do you think that the brain injury really was like not an
Do you think it's an
excuse, but
excuse?
like the competency had some validity in like Sam's whole trial? Because I mean, he was on his way to traffic you up to Canada way back when,
Before
before
the
the
incident.
injury.
No, he was into this stuff.
So he was doing it before.
No, the brain injury didn't all of a sudden make him go from one person to the, like, he didn't go, okay, I'm against trafficking and now, or 9-year-old brides, and then all of a sudden he bonks his head and goes, oh, now it's okay. No, 100% no. But he did go from a fully functional adult who is very charismatic and could relate and laugh and joke, and to so after my accident, I spent time around him and his wife, and she Lydia, she was 8 months pregnant, and he didn't remember her at all. And the first victim was his daughter that was in the affidavit, his biological daughter. And he had, coming out of the hospital, he could go go work and stuff, but he had to be told what to do and where to go. And over time, 25 years, I'm sure he got to be where he was functional without being told what to do or whatever. But that's why I believe so much he's not so charismatic that he could just get inspired and whatever and start this. The brain injury affected him enough that he would do what Moroni told him to do.
It's kind of a puppet master in a
Faith,
way.
weigh in on that again, the whole dynamics. And I just, I've met Moroni in court one day, and you're right, he seems like a big guy is going to shake your hand and look you in the eye and con you with something. But how does that guy become he's sort of the leading the charge, picking up wives, being a prophet himself, and then he gives it all over to Sam, this sort of silly little man, in my opinion, but a guy that I look at him and I think there is nothing sort of saintly, prophet like. At least Warren's a big, tall, imposing. Well, Sam's a little jlubby fat guy who was clearly good at talking. But Moroni gives everything, gives his wives, gives his daughter, and ultimately, I mean, in the macho FLD, he allows Sam to have sex with him. I mean, it got so weird with these guys. How did that happen? Why? What was in it for Moroni?
Well, I would like to point out that when he had sex with Sam, he tried to claim that Sam raped him.
He did say that.
Yeah, and I don't believe Moroni's a much bigger, tougher looking.
Actually, in that affidavit, then it was a spiritual connection, and that when they performed a fellatio, there was multiple times. It wasn't once.
Yeah, right. I mean,
Sure.
They had a threesome with Julia too in front of the girls. There was multiple times it happened. So if he claimed that he raped him, there was multiple times.
What and so explain? I mean, I've covered a lot of crimes in the FLDS community. I've never heard anything.
A grown man is who has multiple wives, and he's been, excuse me, having sex with the same ones for so long or whatever, and he wants to explore and get out and maybe experiment with something else. And there's not any man in the world who is going to turn over his men are sex driven. Okay, you can delete this part. I'm gonna just talk real. So are women, but we're talking about Moroni here. So he's been having sex with 3 or 4 wives, right, for a good 20 years. And then he decides to set this up, and it just goes a little further and a little further. Then he can get more brought in, right? And for a minute, there was one that he ended up turning all of them over to Sam because because they converted her. She was up from in Canada or whatever, and then he turns them over to Sam. Well, a grown man isn't gonna all of a sudden turn into a monk, right? But what does happen is he keeps the quote unquote prophet busy with all these women so that nobody's looking at what he's doing.
Right.
And I think that there's going to be some surprises that come out, because there's not a man in the world who's going to all of a sudden say, okay, I don't want sex anymore. Not for any reason.
Interesting. That's an interesting point, definitely.
Faith.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know why he gave all of his wives to Sam, but I know that he was sharing Sam's wives with him. Moroni was involved in the atonement, which has been talked about a lot, and he was paired up with my sister, who was pregnant at the time with Sam's baby.
Yeah.
He raped my sister, and she's in jail, and he's not. Moroni's daughters, whom he recruited into this sex trafficking organization, are serving prison time, and Moroni is not in prison. Like, this is so bizarre to me.
Yeah, and listen, so our audience is clear. Moroni he was like the first one to cut a deal with the feds. So he gets himself a deal that could get him 10 to life. I'm sure he's hoping for the minimal, but he agreed he's helped from very early on. But he helped, and he came forward only after it was already falling apart.
Mhm.
It's not like he came forward when the cops didn't know anything. They were about to come down on him, and he marched into the office and made himself a deal.
And also that Julia had gone to him and told him that I think Sam didn't want to share anymore or something, because Sam had decided that he needed to perform the blood atonement. And so he realized he was out of the game anyway. So then he went and told on Sam. Anybody who talks to Sam and anybody who talks to Moroni is going to realize anybody who talks to those two men in the same little 5 minutes of each other is going to realize who is more suave than the other one. It's just
True.
how they are.
Yeah.
True.
And for the FBI to act like that they couldn't, that I'm shocked. Yes, I'm shocked.
Yeah.
Do you think that
we expect more from our police and from our justice system?
Okay.
Yeah.
Faith?
I think that when Moroni saw that it was going down, he did what he needed to do to save his own ass. He didn't do it because it was the right thing. He didn't do it because he was trying to help his kids or gave a shit about any of the women or any of the children involved. I think he just did it to save his own ass, and he was willing to throw his own daughters under the bus.
And as you say, because he cut the deal early on, he's basically been out and not behind bars. They've held all of the women behind bars until they've either decided time served, most of them, or they've penalized them. Many of the women, and as you say, the adult women that you're talking about, your sisters, they're in prison for clear. And I don't think there's any way to say the women's culpability is anything like the men's in the balance of power. The women had virtually very few options, and these four.
Maybe Melanie has convinced him that he's more innocent. Maybe they are being taken for a ride, thinking that he's more innocent.
Maybe. Well, I don't know. This is why we want to keep talking about this story, because somewhere along the line, you hope that there is some accounting for the people who are really responsible. Sam's going to do hard time, die in prison. Your brothers, unfortunately, I think, sadly, are going to do a lot of time. They take no joy in that, because my minimal interaction with Torrance, he seemed like a nice young man. But guys like Sam and Moroni, they just seem so much sort of on the heavier end of evil. And you hope,
Gave his 9-year-old daughter to a grown man. Remove everything else. He gave this 9-year-old daughter to a grown man to do whatever he wanted with behind closed doors with nobody looking.
yeah.
And then it was, and they gather her up and clean her up after, and it's all okay. But everything else aside, and he was the father, turned her over to a grown man to do whatever he wanted with, and he's free.
Yeah, it is very hard to understand.
Well, we've gone through lots of stuff, a lot of ugly stuff today, and we appreciate it. Give us, we want you guys to have the final
final
word
word.
on all of this. And
Final thoughts, anything you want to get off your chest, feel free.
what do we need to, what should we learn from all of this?
Well, I think the main reason I wanted to bring Victoria in on this is because I think that Victoria's story from 25 years ago demonstrates that Moroni has a history in the sex trafficking industry from way back then. And that is who he is. And he is still that person today. And no amount of manipulating that he does is going to change that. This is who he is. And he needs
Yeah.
to be locked up forever.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Victoria, that was your story. It's your tale, and we are glad that Faith was finally convinced you to sit down and talk to us, because we've tried before. But
I understand your
yeah,
hesitation. I wouldn't want to talk to him either.
but again, I don't see, this is the thing. None of these stories are one-off. I've been covering this for damn near 50 years, and I don't think any of these guys come out of nowhere.
No.
They sort of, it's a sequence of events. And it's so important to look back 25 years ago when to a vehicle that had Moroni Johnson and Sam Bateman and you in it. And it tells you so much about what has now happened over the many years. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I so bad wanted them to just go take care of their families and be good men. I so bad wanted that. And the sad thing is, if any, I hoped for that, but in my heart I knew better, because I knew who Moroni was, and I didn't mean to take away from all the other things that he did, and he hurt Faith's family and many other people. But I think that people do not realize that Moroni, I'm not taking away from Sam. Sam is accountable for all of his actions, but I think that people do not realize that Moroni is dangerous. Because here's the thing, all the women who are not out, are not in jail, all the women that were his wives, his daughters, that he had influence over, even if they can rehabilitate them, if they have any contact with Moroni, it's going it's going to affect their rehabilitation, or even possibly stop it, because a lot of times it's fear, a lot of times because it's been going, it's been ingrained into you from childhood. Moroni can have influence on the ones that are the girls that are trying to just have a life, and so it affects the ones who are trying to be better, and it affects the ones who aren't. And he, as long as nobody's holding him accountable, he can talk to any of them, and then who knows, maybe he's starting it all over again with a new group, and they're gonna wait for him for 5 years while he does his jail time, and then he gets out and he has a whole nother group to start with, and the ones who are doing the legwork for him are the ones who are supposed to be rehabilitating.
And Faith, this is you have mentioned this from the beginning. These guys are not, the danger does not go away just because they're locked up. If they can communicate, as Victoria
If they can communicate, if you take away the communication, it is.
yeah, that's still a danger.
We see it with Warren Jeffs to this day. He's
Yeah.
been locked up for almost 20 years, 18 years, I believe. And he still has power over followers.
He does. Here's the thing about Warren is there's a lot of followers because there wasn't church, because there wasn't meeting, because there wasn't group. Then they just kind of went out and started doing their thing. But if Warren was able to communicate with the outside world and say, okay, I'm gathering up my flock, a lot of people who have gone out and accepted their life would fall back into line because they would want to be back with the Lord's people and blah, 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 even though that they've chosen not to live the life because there is no organization. And it's, I feel like Moroni has that same influence with some of them is, yeah, you know, because he got them to do things already. If they can get him away from it, then they can actually go have a life. But I don't know how to explain to you the psychological shit that happens to so many of us, even Amelia, me, all of us, from when we're little teeny tiny, that when years later something will come up and we'll go, oh, and catch ourselves from tripping into old behaviors that were indoctrinated into us.
Yeah.
I don't.
We obviously love to talk to you and get your insights into this community
Very
because
much.
we do feel it's important to shed a light because, you know, just because people aren't paying attention doesn't mean this stuff goes away and it doesn't happen.
We want to hold these guys, and we're like you, we want to hold all these guys accountable. From the
Yeah.
day we met Sam, we just felt like we need to help. Any final words?
I don't have anything else to add. I think I've said what I needed to say, and thank you guys so much for giving us this opportunity.
Just because you are closer to many of these young women that we've come to care a lot about, how the ones you know of, how they doing?
They're really excited that I decided to say something about Moroni.
Yeah.
Very excited.
They support, they want him outed, basically.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. They've been asking prosecutors since day one, what's going to happen to Moroni though?
Yeah.
Or what's going to happen, you know? And it's always been a secret.
Yeah.
So,
We're honored that you let us
Yeah.
interview you for that.
Always.
Even with our small little platform, we try our best.
Yeah. Well, hey, thank you both. Victoria, I hope this is not the last time we see you on our little show. And
I'll come back.
we really appreciate it.
Anytime. You're always welcome. Yeah.
All right. Well,
Okay.
we've covered enough.
Always signing off. This is Story Hustler. Thanks, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.